pleasure to be here. You're sort of quite a scary audience, because there are some of you who know quite a lot about the criminal justice system, and there will be some of you who know nothing at all. So how to pitch it. It's also an extraordinarily good discipline to be told you're only talking for 30 minutes. Because how do you talk about what's gone wrong with the criminal justice system in the UK in 30 minutes? Thank you for inviting me. Jenny's given the introduction. I put UK in the title because I am happy to talk about the UK, but I'm definitely not an expert on Scotland's criminal justice system, which is quite surprisingly different. Why? Because I think, and I'm no historian, Scotland and England, Wales came together voluntarily in 1603, and they said we're keeping our criminal justice system, and they have kept their criminal justice system. So there are many countries in the world as a legacy of colonialism, if you like, who have criminal justice systems probably much more like the one I know in England and Wales than Scotland does. But actually, I decided to put UK in the title rather than England and Wales because the problems that we're facing are very similar in Scotland. And so I felt equipped for once to include Scotland within the title. Northern Ireland, the criminal justice system is again much closer to England and Wales than Scotland is. So what is the problem and where do we start? Criminal justice gets quite a lot of coverage in the press, and what is the problem? Is the problem crime? I would say no. Crime is not going up in our society. It's changing quite a lot. There's much, much more fraud than there used to be. It's difficult to know whether there's a lot of crime because the vast majority of crime is never reported to the police. So domestic violence, a problem in every society in the world. Do we know how much domestic violence there is? No, of course, we don't have the slightest clue how much domestic violence is. And whether the criminal justice system can reduce it is a really difficult problem. People have high expectations of criminal justice systems, and actually it's public education and how you bring up your kids and all these things will have a bigger influence on criminal justice than convicting and prosecuting people. I love to go to courts and to prisons. I spend any opportunity, and yesterday I was in Aylesbury Prison in the morning and Aylesbury Crown Court in the afternoon, and I sat in on 3 cases, all of which are dominating my thoughts at this moment. And one of the things I'm going to do in this talk is encourage you all to, you'll find it probably quite difficult to go to prison in this country, but you'll find it really easy to go to court, and it's intriguing. So one of my cases yesterday, I won't give you the details because most of you will think it's absolutely horrible, but a man who looked like quite an ordinary man had taken photographs of his own children and other people's children and turned them into horrible photographs, which I won't tell you about, and shared them with just a few people. And the judge had to decide how long to send him to prison, and he is in prison, and actually he's a very odd man and he's on suicide watch in prison. And what's the right answer? Why on earth do some people make those photographs? So I was left reeling with questions about how many people out there actually do it. I haven't the slightest idea whether it's a really rare event or whether it happens quite often. So we don't know how much crime there is out there, but I think it would be a wrong message for me to give you today that crime is rising. Crime isn't rising as far as we know. The patterns of crime change a lot, and the main thing is we don't know very much. Policing, I could talk for the 30 minutes on policing, and it's particularly interesting this week because the government has announced that they're going to do major changes to policing. And I think there are some really interesting questions about what are the police for, and the police are for some quite contradictory things. Prosecutions, we didn't have an independent prosecution authority, unlike most countries, until 1985. And there are huge problems, I would say, in the relationship between police and prosecutors. One of the problems being that we don't know what the relationship should be. So to begin with, we had our prosecutors outside police stations to be independent, but then we worked out that actually they didn't communicate very well, so we moved all the prosecutors into the police stations. Now they're all online at home working in their pyjamas. Is that better or is that worse? Lots of questions. Courts, really interesting what's going on, and the big problem is the backlog of trials. When I was a student, I think with a certain British arrogance, we could name some of the countries with terrible court backlogs where delays were routine, and we thought, how shocking. And now we are in exactly that position. Cases, serious cases, are being listed for trial in 2, 3, 4 years' time. Complainants in rape trials are giving up. I don't want to come back in 4 years' time and give evidence against my rapist. The backlog is a real problem. And how you deal with it, I've mentioned there straight away juries. Juries are a really important part of our criminal justice system, but actually not an important part at all, in that only about 3% of cases which are prosecuted go to the court where trial by jury happens, and of those, half of them plead guilty, so only a very small number of jury trials happen in this country. There's a lot of, again, media chat about, at the moment, about the plan to limit the right to trial by jury for mediumly serious cases. Personally, I don't think it's a very big argument. I don't think it's very many cases. I don't think trial by jury is the most important thing in the whole wide world, unlike most of my barrister colleagues. There are advantages with juries, but they are slow, and it's definitely not a perfect system. Has anyone in the room sat on a jury, served on a jury? Quite a few of you. Are you born converts, or were you sceptical?
I started sceptical, but I ended up being converted.
A sceptical convert, Janie?
I was happy with the decisions that were made.
But were you a good decision-making body, or did it all take too long?
It took too long.
Yeah. So one of the cases I sat in on yesterday was an appeal from a magistrate's court being done by a judge with 2 lay magistrates. And that's quite a nice compromise. You have a professional judge with 2 ordinary people, but it's very different to our system of trial by jury. So there's no easy answer. Prisons are a terrible disaster, I think, in our country at the moment. I'm delighted if you come and join me. I have been known to give lectures cuddling babies, so leave him. If he comes here, I'll be delighted. Prisons are underfunded, and they've got too many people in them. When I took my first post in this university in 1990, we were all outraged that the prison population in England and Wales had reached 40,000. It's now 88,000. I don't think it needed to be any, or needs to be anywhere near 40,000, but it depends what you want your prison for. Certainly you want to warehouse some people, we need to get people off the streets. But to me, the fundamental purpose of the system is to reduce reoffending, and our prisons absolutely are not equipped to reduce reoffending. People come out more likely to be criminals very often than they go into prison, so there's a lot of problem. Unlike in many countries, when people come out of prison in this country, they are supervised on licence, they report to a probation officer, and we've got 88,000 people in prison in England and Wales, and 240,000 under the supervision of the probation service. And they are even less well funded than the prison system. So, of course, if you're a busy probation officer supervising lots of dodgy people, let's say in Cambridge, and you have somebody who's worrying you a bit, you get them recalled to prison. So we have 16,000 people in prison who've been recalled by their probation officer. And there we're very, very unusual. Other countries tend to wait till you reoffend before you go to prison. We recall you to prison because you're worrying your probation officer. So lots of problems, I would say. Last year there were 2 major reviews. So after quite a number of years of what I would happily say failing Conservative government, we then got a new Labour government, or a Labour government 18 months ago, and it was interesting how to begin with they were quite committed to, we've got to do something about the criminal justice system. Whether they're still committed or whether they decided it's all in the too difficult box, who knows. But they set up 2 reviews, independent reviews. I've always said to students, if something puts independent in its title, then maybe you should worry about whether it's actually independent. So David Gauke, who was a Conservative Minister of Justice, was appointed by the Labour Minister of Justice to chair a review of sentencing. And I was put on his panel, which was a great privilege for me. I found it absolutely fascinating, depressing and worrying and all sorts of other things too, but a privilege to be part of it. And the independent review of sentencing, which started its work this time last year, very, very fast review, report published by May, was asked what to do about the prison population, because at that point I think most policymakers and politicians agreed there were too many people in prison. The prisons are full, you can't build your way out of the problem because it takes a long time to build a prison, and that therefore we should reduce it. I was my naive self to begin with and thought we were going to be saying let's halve the prison population because it would be a really good thing in my book to do so, and really resource the probation service to support people and rehabilitate people in the community. But that was never the agenda of the Gauke review. It wasn't in the terms of reference, and it was clear very early on all we were really being asked to do was limit a little bit, make it more predictable. And also, as David Gauke has said very often in his press conferences since, the reducing the prison population by getting judges to give shorter sentences was in the too difficult pile. How do you stop what we call sentence inflation? It's really clear on the statistics why the prison population has gone up. Isn't more crime, isn't more criminals, it is longer sentences. Many more life sentences, and life sentences, even those, the average length of life sentences used to be about 8 years, now it's 20, 30 years. So sentence inflation, people are being sent to prison for much, much longer. And dealing with that, whether that's a political problem, certainly it's been created, I think, by politicians, because what they've done in the last 40 years is believe what the public want is longer sentences. So there have been lots of changes to different crimes, pushing up the sentence levels, like you have public concern about causing death by reckless driving, so they double the sentence for that. Well, that means you have in effect doubled the sentence for causing death by careless driving. And everything, when the politicians change things, they have made sentences the maximum longer, so that pushes up the sentences that judges give. I like to blame the judges too. They could be being more rehabilitative in their sentences, but they've gone with the flow. They're very worried about the media and so on. So we've had this dramatic sentence inflation, as we call it. And what Gauke said is, we've been told we mustn't look at lifers, we mustn't look at recall. We were told not to look at some of the things which I think are the most important things to look at, and very quickly decided that that sentence inflation was too difficult. So changing the rules on earlier release and some of you may know that the recommendations of the Gork Review, many of them, certainly not all of them, were accepted by the government. The sentencing bill went before Parliament in August, and it got royal assent, as it's called, last week. When you have a law proposal in this country, it starts as a bill in Parliament, it has to go through the journey in the House of Commons and the House of Lords, and then it gets royal assent. The Queen, the late Queen, used to personally sign all Acts of Parliament until about 10 years ago, when she adopted an electronic signature for statutes. And I believe, I don't know, but I believe that Charles has continued the electronic signature rather than personally signing all statutes, which I think is a bit sad, really, but there we are. So there was the Gork Review on sentencing last year, which has changed the release rules more than the going in prison, and won't make much difference, personally, I don't think. There was also the independent review of the criminal courts, chaired by quite a high-profile judge, Sir Brian Leveson. He did a big report about 10 years ago on press freedom, on freedom of speech. He doesn't mind engaging with journalists. He's a tough-speaking, he's a judge who is, unlike the vast majority of judges, he doesn't mind sticking his head above the parapet and talking about all these issues. Most of our judges think that because I'm a judge, I'm not really meant to engage in the public domain, which always makes me a bit sad, because of course judges are experts in their own field, and I'm much more comfortable with somebody like Sir Brian Leveson, who says, yeah, I'm prepared to speak out in fields about things that I know. So Brian Leveson's job was to worry about, as I say on the slide, what to do about the 75,000 cases awaiting trial in the Crown Court. The Crown Court is the court where serious crimes get tried, and where you have trial by jury if you plead not guilty. And again, it's a really serious problem. It started perhaps 20 years ago, it got much worse with COVID, and it's getting worse every day, the backlog of cases. It's ridiculous to have cases being listed for 2029. Case justice, to be fair, should be prompt. Justice delayed is justice denied. And again, I'm not sure that his recommendations, many of them, will make a lot of difference. Curbing the right to jury trial will make a tiny difference, but it'll only make a tiny difference. I tend to, if you were to send me an email, I hope you'd get an answer within 3 hours, because I've never understood these people who sit on their emails for 3 weeks and think somehow it'll be easier in 3 weeks' time. And what we need to do with the courts is cut the backlog by just dealing with it, and then it'll be over. During COVID, they had temporary courts in various places called Nightingale courts. I do feel they could deal with it if they wanted to, but it's problematic. Now, before we work out what to do about all these problems that I've been highlighting, I think we have to work out what we're wanting the system to achieve. And you'll see there that is in a statute, the Sentencing Act 2020, says any court sentencing an offender must have regard to the following purposes of sentencing. And if you read those 5 bullet points, I think they're sort of what you would think that a sensible criminal justice system might want to achieve. What's problematic about it is there's no priority within it. Most judges would say it's a statement of the blindingly obvious. When it was first put into a statute, which was the Criminal Justice Act 2003, the previous Labour government, what was called New Labour in 2003, thought that by passing this it would make judges more consistent. I think it's actually allowed judges to be more inconsistent, because you can say, in this case, the protection of the public is particularly important, or in this case, the rehabilitation of offenders is particularly important, and I'm not going to send you to prison because you're prepared to do drug treatment or something. So I don't think it's had much impact on consistency, and you can be consistently wrong as well as you can be consistently right. I'm not a philosopher. I'm a lawyer verging on being a criminologist, though I'm still more comfortable describing myself as a lawyer. I'm definitely not a philosopher, but I do enjoy teaching philosophy of punishment to students and talking about what your approach to sentencing is. I was taught by the late, great, wonderful Nigel Walker, and in a sense froze, aged about 21, in my views on punishment. And I'm still an old-fashioned consequentialist who thinks that reducing reoffending is pretty basic. It went right out of fashion at the time that I was a graduate student here. In Darwin College over there, it's very sentimental to me, looking at Darwin College. I came to Darwin College in 1976 and met my late husband in a room I'm looking at over there. So, very, very sentimental standing looking at Darwin College. It went out of fashion, that sort of consequentialist world, and for all my working life, really more popular has been what is called just desserts or proportionality, or don't do the consequentialist stuff because it's so often unfair, because you might give people different punishments because of the effect on them. The only justification for punishing people is because they've done wrong. And to me, it's really amazing that the arguments between consequentialists and retributivists are still going on. You'd have thought that Aristotle might have helped us tell us what punishment was for, but actually philosophers are still arguing about what philosophy is for and what punishment is for. And if the philosophers can't help us with a clear answer, we're a bit stuck. And most judges would say, I'm a bit of an eclectic. I believe in all the purposes of punishment, and sometimes one is more important than another, and there is no simple answer. Policing is interesting because we learnt a few weeks ago that the government was going to get rid of police and crime commissioners, and we learnt on yesterday, I think, that they're going to get rid of having 43 different police forces. I think it's quite unusual in this country that we haven't had a national police force. Most countries have a national police force. I think we're still quite romantically attached to the policeman as our friend, and the sort of concept of policing that I grew up with was, if you get lost, go and find a friendly policeman and they'll help you find your way home. And the policeman as the servant of society or a member of civil society. It's changed a lot now, and we're much more aware that we have to hold our police to account, and that there are bad police officers like there are bad people everywhere. Whether that means you want to have local policing or national policing, I think remains a really difficult question. But if you're a visitor to this country, you might be surprised to know that we have the Cambridgeshire Police Force, which is a fully independent, whatever that means, police force. They're not really independent because they get their funding largely from central government, and who pays the bill is always really important. Who should appoint the police is a really difficult question for every country in the whole wide world. And we did, in 1994, invent police and crime commissioners, which I passionately opposed in 1994, and they're now scrapping because now everybody accepts what most academics, I think, knew in 1994. Giving one person the power to appoint and sack chief constables is not a good way to do it. But policing is a really, really difficult issue. I don't think it's the main problem with criminal justice today. Most police officers, senior police officers, would say they don't need more powers, they need more resources and greater priority in what they're to do, what they're meant to do. The Crown Prosecution Service, again, I'm not going to focus on in my half hour today because, anyhow, my half hour is nearly coming to an end, but I do think it's really interesting, the relationship between police and prosecutors. Whenever I go on holiday to any country, anywhere in the world, I always go to court. Even if you don't speak the language, it's really interesting because court architecture is really interesting. Where does the prosecutor sit? Where does the defence lawyer sit? And who's doing most of the talking, even if you don't talk the language? And I haven't yet been to a country, and I've been to very many countries, where I haven't been allowed into court. Sometimes they are absolutely amazed that anyone should want to come to their courts. I remember having quite a discussion in Latvia. Why didn't an English professor want to come into their courts? Was I really a terrorist? But in the end, I did get into the Latvian court, and it was really interesting. Getting into prisons is more difficult, but getting into court you can manage. I won't say anything more there. If you've never been to Cambridge Crown Court, go to Cambridge Crown Court. It's a nice building. It's very welcoming. You do, as you go in, have a bit of airport security, but only a bit of airport security. They'll look in your bag and you go through one of those funny doorways, and if you bleep, as I always do because of my hairpin largely, they might do something. But once you're through security, which is not as much as airport security, the people there are really friendly. There are 3 courts sitting every day, or there should be 3 courts sitting every day in Cambridge, and the nice people at the desk, if you say, I'm a visitor, which court do you think I should go to? They'll say, Court 1 today has a rape trial, Court 2, Judge Findlay is doing lots of sentencing cases, and they'll help you, and you wander in and out. Nobody minds at all. You come in and out, the public seats are at the back, and you can walk in and out, and it is amazing to me how in my lifetime it's changed. When I was a teenager, my local Crown Court was always full. It was largely, I think I remember, full of old men. Why was it? I think it's because it was really before daytime television and the courts were warm. So all the old men of Reading used to go to Reading Crown Court and sit there, and I, as a 15-year-old, made friends with lots of these old men, and they would be able to tell you exactly what was going on in each court and who was about to be cross-examined. And to this day, I'm still addicted to that drama of the Crown Court. Having spent my morning in prison yesterday, I definitely want to spend my afternoon in court, and I should be thinking about those real-life court cases that I sat in on yesterday for days till I pop into Cambridge Crown Court again and get new ideas. Cambridge Magistrates Court you should definitely pop in to too, but you may not see anything. Have we got a magistrate in the room? No, we haven't got a magistrate. More and more of the magistrates, the criminal work for magistrates is actually happening in Huntingdon, which is really annoying because the public transport to Huntingdon is not easy. The magistrates and the magistrates' courts are volunteers. They are very often people very like the NVS volunteers, I would say, look quite like typical magistrates. My mum was a very typical magistrate, the sort of educated woman who gave up work to bring up her children, and when she brought up her children, she became a lay magistrate. They're not paid, which is a big problem, which is why they tend to be middle class, whatever that means. But it's a brilliant role to have. You are really useful, and you are very much involved in the system. Magistrates send people to prison now up to 12 months. They tend to sit in panels of 3, sometimes only 2, occasionally now 1. But the Magistrates' Court in Cambridge is very easy to get to. You all probably walked past it many times. If you've ever been to John Lewis, the Magistrates' Court is next door to John Lewis. And I would say, through my own experience, marginally less friendly than the Crown Court, because I think they do have quite a lot of drunks and ne'er-do-wells who walk in looking for a toilet. So they are slightly more, why do you want to come into the magistrate's court when you're a visitor? But if you say, I'm an interested person and I've been encouraged to come, they'll say, fine. You have the same airport security and you get the lift to the 3rd floor and you have, again, 3 courts, which may or may not be sitting. When they're doing youth justice or family work, they won't let you in as members of the public, but the criminal stuff you all get into. So do all go, especially if you're learning English. There is no better place, I think, to learn English than sitting in the Crown Court and listening to barristers in their wigs trying to persuade jurors to convict or to acquit. If you don't want to go to court, I've given a couple of links there. Increasingly in high-profile cases, judges are sentencing in public and they're put on, very oddly, Sky News website. And that again is a great way of learning English, to listen to judges sending people to prison for a very long time. I get the law students to do it and to mark the judges out of 10, and it's quite interesting how they do that. And there's a wonderful game online called You Be the Judge, and You Be the Judge is an effort at public education, and they're very good. There are 6 little videos of court trials, and at the end, you've heard the prosecution case, you've heard the defence case, and then the video stops and it says, now vote, how would you sentence this person? And then it tells you what they got in real life, and you learn that, oh, I'm a hanging judge, or how lenient I was. So You Be the Judge is a really fun game to play. Less easy to get to prisons. Those of you who live permanently in this country, I would encourage you all to join an IMB. My late husband spent 10 years at Bedford Prison IMB and really enjoyed it, an independent monitoring board, ordinary people who go into prisons, draw keys, go around. I'm very confident that our prisons would be even worse if they didn't have IMBs, if they didn't have ordinary people going in and challenging the governor a little bit, and going around talking to prisoners and then saying to the governor, why are they so unhappy on A Wing at the moment? Or I saw Mr. Bell again today, and his mum's now sent him into 3 pairs of trainers and they've all got lost. So that sort of public interface with the prison management, I think, is a really interesting issue, but they're not open to the public in the way the courts are, so you will find it much, much more difficult, I think, to get in to visit them. I'm already out of time, so my slides just show you, that one shows you how the prison population's gone up. This one's even more depressing. It tells you the huge success in reducing the number of children in prison, but what we've done is reduce the top line, which is the white children in prison, and the black, it's boys actually, this chart is the boys. The middle line is the stable proportion of black boys in custodial institutions, which tells you, actually it's a dated chart, I haven't been able to get rid of another one, but I'll hold of another one. It's about the same now. As many black boys in custody as white boys in custody, and since they're only about 14% of the population as a whole, it's a very troubling statistic. Conclusion, I think there is a problem. I think there's a real problem with our criminal justice system. It is lack of money, largely, lack of investment for many, many years. Many of our courts are leaking, have buckets collecting the dripping rainwater, the prisons are old, not enough judges, not enough well-paid judges, so an awful lot of good lawyers remain in private practice because you get more. Not enough good lawyers wanting to be criminal lawyers because they're not paid as much as the commercial lawyers. But also, more troubling in many ways to me is the lack of political will in this subject. Criminal justice is very political. It does appear in electoral debates and things like that.